So good afternoon, everybody. Today my plan was to cover lesson 8. If you recall, in our last lesson, we covered the type tool, which is a vector-based. And so that means that it's the type is defined mathematically. It can be scaled indefinitely, and it is non-destructive. You can change it anytime you want. Likewise, this lesson covers another aspect of a vector component called the pen tool. And that can be found over here to the left. There it is. There's the pen tool. And there are some variations of that tool underneath that we will discuss. In addition to that, we have shape layers, which is a part of what you see down here in the finished version of the lesson. This little floral image here is created with a shape layer. And the one thing that they've done here is that they've taken an image of an orange and changed the color of it to look like a lemon. The only thing that they've done that's really important here is that they've used the pen tool to define the shape. You don't need to use the pen tool to define the shape, but it's as good a tool as any. Okay. Do any of you who are attending today, have you had, just type in to the chat, yes or no. Have you had experience with Adobe Illustrator? Because that's what we're doing here. This is kind of the vector component, not kind of, it is, the Photoshop. And so no experience, okay. Well, if you get a chance, take Illustrator. It's a very different type of tool to draw with, to make illustrations. Yeah, very different than Photoshop, but what it does is it does an excellent job. So the pen tool that you would use in Illustrator does a better job than what we're doing here in Photoshop. They really haven't changed the tool that much over the years. The lesson, they've kind of pared it down a little bit. It used to be a little bit more complex. Anyway, this is what it's supposed to look like when it's all done. If I come here and I look at the start image, this is what it looks like. We just have a bunch of oranges and we change the center one to look like a lemon. Okay. So to start with, what we're going to do is I'm going to start with the practice sheet. So here's the start here to show you how to use the pen tool. Okay. And again, this has been simplified a little bit. If you were to work in Illustrator, it would be a little bit more complex. So that's what it looks like when it's done. Here's a path that's been created when it's completed. And in fact, what they did here is they created shape layers. When we work in the lesson itself, we will not use shape layers, and where that is controlled when you select the pen tool is in the upper left-hand corner. You'll notice that it's set to path at the moment. If you want a shape layer, then you select that. And you can see that the current layer is a shape layer, and I can come back in here with the move tool here, which is different than the move tool up here. And I can select any number of these shapes, and I can, make sure that they're unlocked, select it, and I can move them, okay? They work independent. Right now we have a stroke that's attached to them. Instead, we could actually apply a fill to that if we wanted to. We could go ahead and add a fill. We could make no stroke. If I wanted to, I could come back in here and I could use the direct selection tool. And if I wanted to, I could come back in here and I could select any one of these anchor points and I could reconfigure the shape in any number of different ways. Okay, that looks decidedly different than what I had a moment ago. And you can continue to change this as much as you want. There's some other things that we can do with this that I want to show you that are not covered in the book. So this is what it looks like when it's done. So this is what I wanted to start with, is the practice one. And I'm going to go ahead and I am going to use, with the pen tool, I am going to use the shape layer and make each one of these a separate shape. And then I will show you in the exercise itself, switching from shape layers to paths and what you can do with paths. So when you're using the pen tool, if you want to make a straight line, it's pretty simple. You'll notice that when I have the pen tool selected, I see an image of a little pen nib. I don't like that. I would prefer to see the crosshairs. So what I do is I put caps lock on, and that lets me be a little bit more precise about the position of my cursor when I do that. And if you want to go back to the pen tool, if you prefer that, you just turn off caps lock and it brings it back. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click on point A, and then I'm going to go to point B. Okay. And now I'm going to go back to the move tool. I'll select that, and I'm going to deselect. And let me go back again. Let me select that. And right now I have fill black and I have stroke none. So I'm going to change that. I'm going to change that to no fill, and I'm going to make the stroke green. And we'll just make it 3 pixels rather, 3 pixels. Okay. So now you can see that actually that should be a little bit thicker. So, select it again, and I can go back and I can change this as much as I want. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use the slider here until I get something that's a little bit more substantial. So we'll make it 8 pixels. How about that? There we go. So now I have a path that I can go back in. And if I wanted to change the angle, I could use the direct selection tool and I could select the point and I can move it up here. Okay. If I want to move the whole thing, I use the selection tool, the path selection tool, and to select it, and I can move that anywhere on the screen that I want, similar to what we did with the type tool. And you'll notice that when I have shape layer selected, you'll notice that, like type, it creates its own shape automatically, or its own layer automatically. So that's for a straight line. If you want to make a curved path, then it's a little bit different. Then what we'll do is I'll use the pen tool again. I'm going to go back and use 8 point for the stroke, and I'm making a shape layer. This time what we want to do is a little bit different. I'm going to click first here, and then I'm going to click here, point B, and then I'm going to drag, before I let go of the mouse, I'm going to drag to this little point here. And I guess I should zoom in a little bit so you can see this a little bit better. There you go, that's better. Now I can go to point C. And again, before I let go of the mouse, I drag again, and notice these little handles that pop out and begin to define that curve. Now I can go to point D and I can click. Now I have a curved path and I can click off of it. So if I go and I click back onto the move tool, again, this is a separate path. You can see that we've created a separate shape layer. It's on its own path, and it can be moved and edited any way you like. And if you want to edit individual anchor points, then what we can do is we can come back again with the direct selection tool. And if I want, I can click on any one of these anchor points and I can begin to manipulate them. So let's select that. And I'm going to move it directly on that point there. I'm going to take this one and I'm going to move it up a little bit. I'm going to take this one and move it up a little bit. And the handles here kind of function like teeter-totters, that if I pull on one end, if I pull up on that end, it pushes the other end down. But there is a way that we can make it work independently of one another, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. Okay, and then to click off of it so that none of the points are activated, I go back and I click outside it, and now nothing is selected. So let's go back and let's create another one. And this is more like a little sine wave here. So now we're making paths that are a little bit more complex. So if I come back with a pen tool, Again, I'll click. I'm going to start off the same, and I'll click here, and then drag. And then I come back to the next point, and I click here, and I drag, and I click again, and I drag, because it's a continuous curve. And I click, and I drag, and I click, and I drag, and then I click. Now, I think there's a better way to do this. So I'm going to go back several steps and do it again my own way, because this doesn't look very smooth and even. And I'll tell you right now, when you're using the pen tool, the trick to using it is to use as few points, to create as few number of anchor points as you possibly can to create the most elegant curves. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to select this, and I'm going to throw it away. Just throw it in the trash. Boom, it's gone. So I'm going to do it a little bit differently. I'll come back with a pen tool, and I'm going to just click and drag. Whoops, I didn't want to do that. Let's undo that. Let's make sure that this is deselected. Got to make sure that nothing is selected, because I want to create a new path here. I want to make sure that there are no active layers. So let me try again. Now let's try the pen tool. And I'm going to click and drag. There we go. If you're not careful, if the last path is still active, it will want to continue to make a path from that. So I'm going to click here. And I could go up to the top, but I'm going to try to go over here and click and drag like so. Now that didn't go all the way to the top over here, but that's okay. Because now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click here at the end point, and I'm going to click and drag until that matches. So notice that the path is much more elegant than the last one, much smoother. And I only used 3 anchor points to do that. So now to clean this up a little bit, because I didn't stretch this far enough when I clicked and dragged to pull out that handle, I'm going to come back with a direct selection tool, click on the end, and pull out this a little bit more until it fits. And that looks, excuse me, much more elegant. Now I can click on the path, the overall path, and I can move it, put it into place, position it. And if I want to move any of these points at all, again, individual points, and you select the direct selection tool. So again, I come back and I select on individual anchor point, and I move it into position like so. And if I want to change the curvature a little bit, then I can tweak that a little bit. And if I want to change the curvature of this, so I can tweak it just a little bit until it fits the underlying path just fine. Okay, so that's a more complex way of doing that. Excuse me, tickle in my throat. So the last part of this is the most complex way of building this. So I'm going to make sure that nothing is selected. Using the path selection tool, click off anywhere in the white area to deselect. Now you can start wherever you want when you're making a closed path. But you do need to work either clockwise or counterclockwise. You can't jump around in the path. You have to go in a sequential order. So they've decided to start in this upper left-hand corner and then go clockwise all the way around here. And wherever they have a solid dot is where you click, and wherever they have a hollow dot is where you drag to create that curve point. But you'll notice that in certain areas here, they go from curved to corner and corner to curved. So how does that work? So that requires a little bit of finesse here. You can either use because you'll notice over here, I have the pen tool. I have the freeform pen tool, which I think is a total waste. We have the curvature pen tool or path tool, which is kind of nice, but it works much better in Adobe Illustrator. I can add anchor points, and I can subtract anchor points, and I can convert anchor points from corner points to curve points using this tool. So these are all the tools that are underneath here. So I'm going to start here. And as I said, we started with something that was angular. So I'm going to click, And if I want it to be perfectly horizontal, I hold down the Shift key, I move over to point B, and I click. And now it's perfectly horizontal. Likewise, if I want it to be perfectly vertical, I hold down the Shift key again, and I move down here, and I click. And then I click. So now I'm creating, a closed path. Click. And now what I want to do is notice that what's happening here, I'm pulling this out, but it's pulling both of them out. I don't want to do that. So let me click here and connect that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the Option key, and I'm going to pull out the tangent handle like so. Now I can go to here. Notice it's already curved. And now I can come over here. Actually, I'm going to undo that because I'm going to do it my way, not the way that the book tells us to do it. I'm going to pull that out. Now I'm going to go to this point, and I don't need to curve it that much, just a little bit. Now I'm going to come to here and click and drag and pull this out like so. And now I'm going to go to here. Now I'm going to have to tweak this a little bit, and I'll go ahead and I'll just click. Now see, it's all discombobulated, and now I can come back to the beginning. And when I do, you'll notice that even though I had the little target or cross member selected, when I go over the starting point, I get the pen icon, pen nib, and a circle in the lower right-hand corner, which lets me know that I'm going to close it. Now this part is all goofed up, okay? So what I need to do is I need to come back with the direct selection tool, and I need to fix it. So I'm going to come back in here. I'm going to select this point, and let's move this over here like so. Now, if I want to get rid of this, make it a corner point, I can hold down the Option key. I can click on that, and that got rid of that. If I move this, whoops, I don't want to do that. I need to come back with the direct selection tool, click again on the point. So this one, like so. Okay. Now I can come back over here, and let's click on this again. I'm going to pull on this to pull this out a little bit. I'm going to pull on here, pull that out a little bit, and then I'm going to click on the anchor point until it fits. And here, and I got to pull this back. Notice by pulling that back, that fits just fine. Now I can come back in here, and I can move this until it fits nice and snug. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to hold down the Option key. Actually, I'm going to switch, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use the Convert Anchor Point, and I'm going to click right here, turn that into a curve, a corner point. Now I can come back over here, and I'm going to use the direct selection tool, and I can pull on that and pull it back to make it fit. Again, I would make mine a little bit differently than theirs. So I'm going to go back and do it one more time and show you how I would do it, because I probably didn't do it exactly the way the book tells you anyway, but you'll notice that it fits quite nicely now. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn that layer off, and I'm going to try again with another one, but I'm going to do it my way. So I'm going to select again the pen tool, and I'm going to click, and I'm going to hold down the Shift key and click, hold down the Shift key and click, click, click. I'm holding down the Shift key, click, and now I'm going to go ahead and click and drag. That works nicely. Then I can click and drag, and that works nicely. Then I just click, and that finishes it. And then I move to the end and I click. This still needs a little bit of cleanup, but again, we can go back to the direct selection tool. We can select the anchor point, and we can move it into position. We can take the tangent handle and we can move it, clean it up a little bit. Again, click first on anchor point, put it into position, and then afterwards go ahead and play with the tangent handle until you decide that you want it to be, where you want it to be, until you get a nice smooth curve. Now, if I wanted this to change abruptly, right now, remember I said that the tangent handle, that these are connected. If you wanted to disconnect them or unlink them, then you would go to the convert anchor point tool. So we're going to come back up here, convert, and now when I clicked on that little tangent handle, notice that it works independently of the other tangent handle now. Okay, so I can move this in any direction that I want, like so. I can also, remember I said you can add anchor points. So if I come over here and I select that I want to add an anchor point, anywhere along the path, you'll notice that the cursor changes. And you get the little plus sign. So I can click there and I can add one. I can click here and add one. And then I could go back to the direct selection tool and I can click and I can move it like so. I could click here and I can move it like so. Let's say I wanted the bottom here to be not be curved, but come to an abrupt angle. So then I switch from the add to convert, and then I click on there, and now that comes to a really sharp point. If I wanted to get rid of an anchor point, then I would use the remove anchor point tool or delete. And remember, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. So what that's going to do, as soon as I remove that, is it goes back to a straight line. Okay. So if I go back several steps, undo, it takes me back. So that's in a nutshell, that's the pen tool. And for many, many years, this is what Adobe Illustrator was all about. It revolved around, the foundation of Adobe Illustrator was based on this tool. It's used for creating logos. It's used for creating stylized illustrations. It's used for all sorts of things. Okay, so let's go back to the end here. And I'm going to leave the type and the little symbol here to the very end. And let's look at this, and let's look at the start one right here. So you're going to see that they've given us a guideline here to create our path. So, but make sure that you have, I mean, it doesn't really matter, but I'm going to, whether I have the background layer selected or not, it really doesn't matter, because I'm going to switch now when I use the pen tool. And instead of a shape layer, I just want this to be a path. I don't want it to fill. I don't want it to create its own layer. I want to create just the path. And then what I can do is I can take that path and I can convert it to a selection. And when it is a selection, remember what we did in lesson 6, I can create a an adjustment layer, not an adjustment layer, I'm sorry, a clipping mask or layer mask, and then I can affect it directly that way. Probably what I would like to do before I do anything though, is I'm going to go ahead and copy that background layer in case I goof things up. I'm going to select. Now let's go ahead and use the pen tool. I'll start here and I'm going to click and click and drag. Now I'm going to click, and I feel that they use way too many anchor points. You could have done this in many, many fewer points, but I'm just following their guide here. So I'm clicking on the solid dots and dragging to the hollow. Click and drag, and then I just click, and then I click and drag. Excuse me. Click and drag, and then I just click and then I click, and then I click, and then drag, and I click and drag. And again, if you forget to do any of these, it's best to go all the way around and add anchor points as needed, or use the convert tool to create what you need. Now you'll notice that it's kind of messed up a little bit. So again, I can come back with the direct selection tool. Even though I followed their guideline, I can click here. I can move it into, no, I accidentally moved the whole thing. I want to make sure that I have the direct selection tool. And I want to select on an individual anchor point. If you don't, the whole thing is selected. That's not what you want. There we go. We can go ahead and we can, you know, finesse this and move it into position. For our purposes, this is okay. You know, it's not great, not perfect. I would take the time to really carefully create my path. Now I want to turn this path into a selection. And you'll notice that if I switch from layers to paths, I have a working path right now. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save that path. I'm going to click here. I'm going to say save path. It's going to ask me to name it. If I want to leave it as a path 1, I can, or I can just name it, you know, orange. Okay. Now, if I click off of it, notice that the path disappears. If I go back to layers and I turn off that guide, but I go back to paths and I click on the path, notice that it's probably very hard for you guys to see this, but it's a light blue guideline that I have here. So now that this path is selected, if I need to edit it for any reason, I can use the direct selection tool. You'll notice that the anchor points pop up here. Okay, and we can pull them down a little bit and we can tweak this, you know, as much as we like. So as, you know, as much as you want. But then what we want to do with this is we want to turn it into a selection. So what we do is we come down here, the bottom here, and you'll notice that if I want to fill this, I can fill this with a foreground or background color, that area. I can, but it will fill it on that layer that I have. So I probably would want to create a blank layer. So let me do that just to be on the safe side. I'm going to go ahead and create a blank layer up here. Now I'm going to come back to the path, and with it selected, I can also go ahead here and I can turn this into a selection. So now it turns it into the marching ants. If I want to change, if I want to save the marching ants, then I go up to select and I say save selection. So I can also name this orange. Okay, but this is more fixed. This, if I deselect this, okay, and I go back to channels now, you can see that that orange selection that I saved is still there. So if I hold down the command key and I click on there, it brings that selection back up. So there's a whole bunch of different ways of doing things. The other thing that I can do with a path, let me deselect, bring that path up. Let's say I wanted to paint a shape around this. What I could do is I'd make sure that the path is selected. And then what I can do is with the my brush tool, okay, and let's say I want to put a pink color around this. So let's go ahead and change this to a nice bright red or pink, something like that. There we go. Something really bright in my foreground color. Okay. Now what I can do is I come down here and the next one over, let's see, I want to, with the path, hopefully I can still do this. They haven't changed it. I want to, let's go back up here. Let's see if I can do this from up in my edit menu. I want to stroke path is what I want to do. Let's say stroke. I'll try that. Nope, couldn't do it. Wrong thing. So I simply want to do that from here. Let's go make working path from selection. No. Add a layer mask. No. Create a new mask. No. So it's not a lot. Yeah, I want to stroke the path from here. There we go. I'm going to click there. So why isn't it doing it? Let's make sure that I have it selected. I'll have to come back to it because it's not working the way I had planned. So let's make sure that this path is selected. There we go. So that's selected now. It wasn't before. Now I'm going to go ahead and select this. It's this one right here. It says stroke path with brush. That's it. So with the path selected, with also the brush tool, you have to preset that to a defined brush and size. Now I can go ahead and I can click here and it should work. Let's go back in here. And why aren't you working? So let me go back to layers. Let me go back here. Let's try that again. Try one more time. No, not working. Let's try the, well, it's filling, but it's not stroking. So let me undo that. Why it's not stroking? So I need to check my brush. It's only 3 pixels, so let's go ahead and pick something bigger. Maybe that will make a difference. Opacity 100%, smoothing, normal. So let's try again. Let's try that. There we go. So now it's working. It just had to play with the settings of the brush. And now I've stroked that and I deselect that. And you can see that I've outlined my path. But if I go to layers, you can see that it's on that layer and I didn't want to do that. So I'm going to undo that. So the next step, they want us to change this to, I'm going to go back and I'm going to go back to paths, select the path. And I'm going to make, I already made the marching ants, but I can, from here, I can make a layer mask. Okay, so if I go back to channels, you can see that that is done. Actually, it might be easier for me if I go back to paths and make a selection, go back to layers, and then from here, I'm going to go ahead here and I'm going to throw this one away. Just going to delete it. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make a, notice that it created its own mask here, my own layer mask. So if I turn that on and off, you really can't see the difference. But now with this layer selected, I can come back and I can add an adjustment layer. And the one that I'm going to use is the one here called Hue Saturation. And I'm going to change the hue to just, we're going to drag it up to 17. Now notice it's, remember I said with adjustment layers, it affects all the layers beneath it. I only want it to affect the layer directly beneath it. So I hold down the Option key. I move the mouse in between the 2 layers and I click, and now you'll notice it only affects that layer here. So I kept the original layer intact. I used the pen tool to create a selection, actually a path for this. And then what I did is that I turned that path into a selection and I saved the selection just in case I wanted to use it again. And then I need to go to the paths and, you know, make sure that it's deselected. Okay. Oh, I did add a path there. You know what? I added that. It's just a very thin pink line. So I didn't want to do that after all. Let me go back several steps. Let me go back and deselect that. Let's undo. Yeah, I added that a while ago. It was working just the way I had planned. Now it's gone. There we go. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go back to where I was going to have before. Select the path. I don't want the little pink line. Make my, no, I don't want to do that. Now it's doing everything that I didn't want. There we go. Make my marching ants. Go back to layers. With this top layer selected, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a layer mask. Notice that it cuts it, turn that on, brings it the bottom layer, it brings it back. Select this layer, and I'm going to throw this one away because I don't need it. I don't need the path guide anymore. And with this layer selected, I'll go ahead and add the adjustment layer, hue saturation. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change the hue again to like 17, make it turn into a lemon. Hold down the Option key in between the two. And there you go. There you have it. It's just a different way of making a selection. Now, what we could do, let me turn off this layer. Let's select this background layer again, and I'm going to make a copy of it. Command J, just for the heck of it. Turn this one off. Is that, by default, if you want a real crisp edge and you want to control it, then the pen tool is really good for that. However, it might be worth, you're trying, if you want, is just to use up here, we can use the quick selection tool. Okay. And you'll watch, if I click and I drag in here, it's doing a pretty nice job. Look at that. And a couple of strokes of the mouse, it made a nice selection of what I wanted. It was able to detect the edges, and I could come back in here and refine it. So if you're not familiar with the pen tool, this might be a way to go. This might, instead of using the pen tool. But for those of you who have experience with Illustrator in certain instances, and this would be a good one, the pen tool is the way to go. Now, one of the other things that they want to cover in here, let's look at the finished one here, is that there are preset shape layers if you want to use them. So if we look at the end one here, you can see here's that yellow little flower pattern. Well, if you want to create that, they also have us create some type in here, and you should know how to do that. So I won't cover that, but I'm going to show you how to create the shape layer for this. So I'm going to come back over here. Let's go to the start file again. Let me turn on some of the layers. So I don't want that one. I have it reversed. How did I reverse it? Whoops. There we go, because I didn't turn that on. I just want that affected there. I don't want that one. Let's select that. How did I reverse it? My goodness. Well, let me take that off. Let's turn this back on. Let's move hue saturation just on this one. I've got it reversed. I don't know how the heck I did that. Well, let's leave it that way. What the heck? I guess I'll just undo a few steps. There we go. No. There we go. Okay. So now with hue saturation turned on, I'll go back and I'll make sure that affects. No, didn't want that. Oh, the wrong layer. Let's go ahead here. Let me go into hue saturation. No. Let's go back to none. And with this selected, it should only affect the layer directly beneath it. So let's turn that off. So why don't I have this? This is reversed. That's why. So let's select this. Oh, I got to go back several steps. I'm just making a thorough mess of all of this, huh? So this is reversed out. So let me, I'm going to throw this layer away. You know, when in doubt, go back and I may, you know, that's why I try to work non-destructively. Now let's go back to my paths. Let's go ahead and select the path. So I've got my path selected. I'm going to go ahead and make a selection from that. I'm going to go back to layers. With this layer selected, I can create a, there we go. So that's working. And now I can go back to my adjustment layer, go to hue saturation. Let's turn this and change the hue, turn this to yellow, hold down the Option key. Ta-da, back in just a couple of seconds. So let's go ahead now and let's look at the shape layers again. And that would be under here. We have all of these. Now I can turn these into paths or shape layers, but I want shape layers. So I'm going to go ahead and switch to shapes and click here. Now you'll notice that there's a little custom shape tool down here, and this is where we get that rose color. And you'll notice that up here in shapes, we have libraries of shapes. We have flowers, so let's look at the flowers. Okay, we can scroll down until we find the one that we want. I think the one that they want us to use, doesn't really matter. We'll use this one right here. Okay. And now what I can do, and by default, black is selected. So when I click and I drag, actually, because I had the fill selected up here to pink, that's the one that it affected. Now to move this, I have to use the shape or the move tool from here. And that allows me to move the whole thing. I can change the opacity of it. So this is on its own layer. So I can come in here and I can change the opacity of it if I wish. Okay. And when I deselect, notice I get the flower. Now, if I don't want pink, if I want, like they used yellow, all I have to do is double click on the layer. It brings up the color picker, and I can switch to yellow. Ta-da, I've created my custom shape. So it might be worth your while to look at some of these custom library shapes here. They have a whole slew of them. They've changed them in recent iterations in here. So here's a group called flowers. Here's another one called boats. They used to have more kind of strange, matter-of-fact kinds of shapes. Here's some for wild animals that you might want to use at some point. And you can also import your own from Adobe Illustrator or from other third-party elements, palm trees, you know, baobab trees, cedar trees, whatever you want. So if I select cedar tree, for example, hold down the shift key and I click and I drag, you know, there's my tree. And because this is a vector element, this can be any size I want it. I'm not restricted, or as if I change the resolution of my document, it will conform to that new resolution. And I can, as I said, I can make it bigger, smaller, whatever I want without any you know, constraints. You can always turn it off. You can always throw it away. Do what you want with it. So that's pretty much what I wanted to cover today, is the pen tool. It's the pen tool in a nutshell. I was going to do this in 2 lessons rather than 1. But what I can do on Monday, no, it's fine. Since we're working with a shortened week because of the holiday on Monday, we're good. I can go to lesson 9 next week, or what I can do when we have time is I can come back to this and I can show you what you can do in Adobe Illustrator, which is a little bit nicer. It's a stronger tool, much stronger. And you'll notice that in my selection here, I didn't do such a great job. I can see a little bit of yellow here that overlaps. You would want to tweak that and make the change to those. You know, you'd want to do a cleaner job. But it works just fine. Okay, so just another way of making a selection using the pen tool. It's also a way to, if you want to stroke a path with a brush, you can do that. And I had done that from the get-go, but I didn't realize that 3 pixels was so thin, I needed something much thicker to make it more visible. Okay. And there are other things that you can do with that as well. So, do I have any questions? Somebody here has a question. Let me go ahead. Let's see. No questions from anyone? Oh, let's see, I've forgotten your name. Oh, Cynthia Barnett, do you have a question for me? You had your hand raised. Yes, no? No? Well, I'm going to pause my recording and I'm going to finish taking attendance, and then we'll call it quits for today. The pen tool can be a very complex tool to learn. It's not used much anymore in Photoshop. As I said, they really have not made any changes to it in probably forever, at least in Photoshop. They have made considerable changes to it in Adobe Illustrator and made, several improvements over the years. And it is a very powerful tool when used to make illustrations and logos and things like that. It can work really, really well. There's also tools in Adobe Illustrator 2 that will allow you to take a bitmap image like this, and it will allow you to vectorize it. Can't do that in Photoshop. It will automatically trace the shapes for you. That can be very powerful. Yeah. So there's lots of things that can be done that you just can't do here. I guess they show it just to be showing it. If you're wondering what these tools are over here, and that's what they are. And if you, for any reason, if you want to make any of the basic shapes like rectangles or triangles or that sort of thing, like for our first assignment, when I showed you that if I'm going to switch shape layer, let's change the color of this to pink. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click and drag like so. If you recall, that was that. And I could go ahead, remember the little panel that we made? And then I could go ahead and the pen tools, and I could add an anchor point, and I could go ahead and add one right here, like so. And I could use the direct selection tool, and I could click in here. Whoops, I didn't want to do that. Let's go back and select just that individual anchor point, move it in. I don't want it curved, I wanted it angular, so then I could come back in with the convert anchor point tool, click on that anchor point, and boom, there's my little shape. And again, I can come back and change the colors any way that I see fit. Okay, so I can change this one, I wanted it yellow. I'll go back and change that because I may have had that one selected by mistake. Remember, if you still have these layers selected, they will be affected when you apply the tool because they are, non-destructive. They can be changed indefinitely. Okay, so if there are any questions, then we're done for today. I will say goodbye. Where do you post your recordings? They're on YouTube. So I will show you before we leave today. I'm going to go to, and there are, if you go to Canvas, you will see what I had posted from last semester, which is really no different. But if you go to YouTube, let me just put in, this is the one that I have. These are where all of them are. And here's my playlists. And you can see that these were where the others are. But if you wanted to hunt for it, search for a channel. Let me go ahead and log out of this real quick. So I don't normally log out of my own here. But let me go ahead and do a search. Let me open up a brand new window here. I wasn't planning on doing this. And let's go to youtube.com. Okay. And now what you want to do is if you have your own channel, you can, but I can do a search and I can put in Kirk Miller. You can also access it by way of, and this is the one that I have. And you can, this is the latest lecture. Well, you don't want, this is another Kirk Miller who's a bodybuilder. That's not me. So let's say this isn't the one that you want, but if you click on this one, it should article and then the right side. It should take you to mine, my lessons. And then you could look under here and you could go to, let's see. Let's go to, this was lesson 6 for my web class. You should be able to go to it. Let's go to panels or to library. So let's go to library. This is my own personal library. So if you've done that, if you go to there and you have your own personal library, you can go, and I have a number of subscriptions that I've added for myself. And you can also look at, my playlists. This right now is Art 196, but I could switch from Art 196. Let's look at the more settings here. You can see here's the one that I have for Art 192B and Art 192. And here's all the ones that I have added for this semester under this playlist. Okie doke. So if you can't find it, then just simply go to Canvas and look at, let's do that. Let's go to Canvas. Let's go to Canvas, Canvas. That's not it. Where do I have it? There's Canvas. No, it's not. Let me go to Canvas. Again, I wasn't prepared for this, so I'm kind of groping around here, trying to find out what I need. Here we go. Here was the attendance that I had. So let's instead, if you go to courses and you have access to Art 192, and if you switch to modules, these are all of the lessons that I've created. And there is the postcard assignment. There's lecture 7. Lesson 6, lecture 6. Remember how I inverted those? lecture 8 video. So this could be the one. It may be lesson, nope. See, let's go back. So it's probably lecture 9. And this is the one that I did last semester. Nope, it's not that one either. If you were to go to my playlist though, so maybe lecture 8. How about lecture 11? This was in order. Here it is. So this would be lecture 11. This is the one that I did for that semester, for last semester. I'm just repeating what I did. Maybe I have fewer mistakes in that one. Who knows? Okie doke. So either way, if you have your own playlists and you want to add to it, do a search for Kirk Miller and you'll find mine. And I have a number of playlists and I have one for this semester for Art 192. So there you have it. We're done for today. Okie doke. So I'm going to say goodbye. I'm going to stop recording, pause recording,